Hi, and welcome to the Bitcoin Effect, where we discuss current events and the social, economic, and political impact of the most sound monetary instrument ever created, Bitcoin. So, Trudeau has enacted the Emergency Powers Act, which means that the government can freeze your bank account and stop your insurance without a court order. So how does this end? One of the factors in this dispute is Deputy PM Freedland, who, by the way, is a governor of the World Economic Forum, says that this ability to freeze funds includes seizing Bitcoin. You're going to have to tell me exactly how they might try to do that and what measures Bitcoin holders might have to apply to assure that that doesn't happen. Then, as time permits, I want to ask this question. What type of asset is Bitcoin? Is it different for the 25, 45, and 65-year-old? And what about the amount of retirement assets that each age group actually has? Because statistics show that most Americans are way behind where they need to be when it comes to being able to retire. How does Bitcoin fit into that? And is Bitcoin right for every age group and savings level for over the next 10 years? Finally, if we have time, I want to discuss this. There's a bill in the House of Representatives in the United States proposing that a digital asset transaction that would result in less than a $200 capital gain would not be subject to tax. Now, I used to think that it was transactions of up to $200, but that's a big change when you consider the amount of money that may or may not have been made when you first bought the Bitcoin and then when you go to spend the Bitcoin. See, this makes the bill that much more amenable to get on zero Bitcoiners, investors, and, as importantly, retailers. So how would this accelerate adoption? And what do you think other legislation needs to occur to push forward toward Bitcoin being a monetary tool for everyone? These are the topics that we'll cover today. I'm Nate Martin, and this is the Bitcoin Effect.
What on earth got you interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
Okay, so what's Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is...
So what's Bitcoin?
Inflation-resistant money.
Bitcoin is the strongest asset the human race has ever invented.
The Bitcoin Effect is moving to Mondays, beginning next week on February 21st, still at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Be sure to join the conversation here on Twitter Spaces. The conversations in this Twitter space are being recorded for use on various media platforms, and any contributors to the conversation irrevocably consent to the recording and distribution of reproductions of the contributor's voice and performance as part of this program. I want to welcome to the stage Logscale, who has been co-host and producer for many of, if not all of the Bitcoin Spot productions here on Twitter Spaces. Log, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm just a little bit frenzied because a winter storm caught up on me. Wasn't following the weather closely enough, and I've got like a 700-foot long, steep driveway that's not plowable. So I had to make a really quick run to the grocery store and back before your show, and that's what I'm out of bed.
So, I was like, why don't we? It's like he's not on another space. What's going on? If for those of you who don't know, Log actually, well, you don't know, Log DM'd me and said, "Oh, we might be 3:15 before we get started today." And I was like, I don't know why, but okay, whatever. And now that you've told me, that makes perfect sense. We had a storm a couple days ago, and I think I had 10 inches of snow on my driveway. Now, I don't have the downhill driveway that you're talking about that's 700 feet, but still, it's like, really, I got to go out there and do this again? So, that kind of tells you where I live. I'll just, I'm about an hour and a half outside of Chicago in Michigan, so there you go. But we get lake effect snow. In fact, we had a friend of ours that said, about 20 miles away, that said, we got nothing going on here. Why can't you come over? And this actually was Sunday for the Super Bowl. And I said, well, we got snow coming down. I can barely see across the street. And it's one of those things where, it doesn't have to be very far away for the weather to be completely different. But anyway.
I grew up in a snowy climate, but flat, right? So, right. After the snow, plows are out pretty quick and you're good to go. Then I moved to the mountains, and that can be a totally different story. I mean, there was one storm here a year or two ago where all roads off and on the mountain were closed for 3 days. It's it's a little different when you got that kind of terrain. But speaking of close by, I'm also, like, as the crow flies, just a few miles from the desert. So it's California for you.
Oh, my word. Yeah, that's, with the mountains and everything, yeah, you can go from snow to desert in a hurry, just depending on how high up you are. So Yeah, I totally understand that. I got to get out to California. I haven't been out there yet, so I need to go out there and visit. With the current situation, I don't know that I'd ever want to live there, but that could change. But at any rate, I want to start with Justin Trudeau, and I think he's being a petulant child, and I'm not the only one. I take a look at what he's doing. It's like, did you have to pull out a shotgun to kill a fly? It just seems like a whole lot of governmental overreach for something that was supposed to be to protect the sovereignty and the borders of the country. This wasn't intended to be basically a bowling ball to throw down the alley and crush everybody that's a citizen that is just voicing their concerns. So, the question becomes, how does this end? Because it looks as though Trudeau is digging in. The truckers, they want to dig in, but there's so much that's at stake for them, to the point where accounts are being frozen, to the point where they can literally stop their insurance on the trucks, and they can even seize the trucks. And we're talking about $100,000 fines. So how does this all end? Log, I'll kind of get on you, and then I do have a request. So go ahead and give me your opinion as far as how does this end, or what is the situation, or speculate for me as far as what is going to be accomplished through all of this.
Well, I think Trudeau is caught in this situation where he's really not aware of what a lot of people are thinking and living in his own bubble and doubling down, where, I think by contrast, say like the Biden administration, they paid a little bit more attention to what the average American was thinking. And there were a lot of people who were thinking differently, and they realized they kind of needed to compromise. And none of that seemed to be going on with the Canadian government. And so I think that his administration is kind of living in its own bubble and doesn't really understand what's going on. I also think that the truckers have made a strategic mistake in blocking the roads. They should have gone on strike and, parked alongside the road or in a truck stop or wherever, and they would accomplish the same thing because they could basically shut down the supply lines. But by blocking the roads, they've opened themselves up to this accusation of being terrorists and harsher, retaliation by the part of the government. So I think that was a big strategic mistake on the part of the truckers.
I want to ask anyone who is one of our Canadian friends that's here in the room to go ahead and request come up, because I have zero knowledge of what the election process or the appointment process of prime ministers or MPs or anything is like. And you talk about the Biden administration, and here in the United States, we have basically every 2 years a changing of the guard, at least in the House of Representatives, because every single representative is up for re-election in every 2 years. And so these midterms coming up, it makes the Democrats go, we need to listen, or else we're going to get totally shellacked in the midterm elections, meaning that nothing's going to get done over the next 2 years between 23 and 25, because you would have a Republican House of Representatives and a Democratic executive branch, which means that there's going to be gridlock. So not a whole lot would get done. So I am hoping that, Log, I don't know if you're familiar with the Canadian election system, or, how long Trudeau has left in a term, or what that even looks like.
I'm not, and I would love it if a Canadian came up here, or anybody who knew.
Nobody's speaking up on that. But the other thing, though, too, and I'll go on to the next topic, which actually has a lot to do with this, is that Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland has said, and her being part of the World Economic Forum makes me just kind of, lean back and cross my arms anyway, says that the ability to freeze funds includes the ability, for lack of a better word, to freeze or seize Bitcoin and other digital assets. So my question is, how would they do that? Because they don't have any governmental control over any central bank or any entity that would be able to actually freeze that. The mind has...
I think we're going to find out. And I think that There are people who don't have their Bitcoin in self-custody, people who have poor key management. And I think governments can take advantage of that, kind of like they did with the Bitfinex hackers.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be a lesson. And it'll just be another one of those things that it'll be an attack that Bitcoin survives and then ends up being stronger because of it.
Yeah. The Mayan has come up onto this stage. You have a comment or question about this? The Mayan? Going once? No? Okay. So actually, then let's have. I can see in the audience there are a number of people that can answer this question a heck of a lot better than I can. But when you're talking,
hello.
Oh, there he is. Okay, the Mayan, you are up on the stage. What have you to say?
Basically, what the Canadian government can do is, if all parties they can vote on no confidence, and it would get us into a re-election campaign, basically.
When you say all parties, what parties are you talking about? 'Cause I'm totally ignorant of the systems.
So the Conservative Party, the NDP, and if they decided that they have no confidence in the current government, could vote a no confidence vote, and that would get us into an election to choose a new prime minister.
So the no confidence vote is for the prime minister only, right? There must be some.
Yes.
Some
So all
serious.
parties would have to vote in that they have no confidence in the current government.
And right now, the Liberal Party is the minority party.
In and out. Sorry.
That's okay. So right now, the Liberal Party is the minority party. So
Yes.
if there was a no confidence vote right now, you're telling, I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're telling me that it's probable that the no confidence vote would go through and you'd have another election in how soon?
I think a year.
Is it a year?
Or two. Usually it's about that range.
You hear me sigh. I'm like, guys, you gotta wait. You gotta wait that long. Oh my word! But we have to wait that long anyway. So it's not as though it's that much different. I read or I heard somebody say that right now only 16% of the Canadian citizens would actually want Trudeau to come back. That's only 1 in 6, and that's a horrible statistic. And it boggles my mind that somebody who's in leadership would basically just trample on the opinions of his entire constituency and not come to the table at all to negotiate, and I know that the three basic demands, and they were basic, were no more mandates, no vax passports, and there was one other one, and it was stop the media, well, not media bias, but the divisive media coverage. That's something I don't know that the government can actually do, except for I do know that there is a lot of government control within the media, specifically I think CBC. I'm not sure, but those are pretty simple. And the thing is that if there's negotiating room, so that people know, at least give us a deadline. Give us a deadline. When do the masks come off, or what is the science that's going to say that we're going to be able to get out of this pandemic? And there are numerous countries, states, even provinces within Canada that are saying, hey, listen, by the end of this month or by the 14th of March, we're going to end the mask mandate and end the vax passport. So what is keeping the federal government from actually following their own provincial ministers and doing that? This is what absolutely boggles my mind. So here's the thing. With Bitcoin, and I had an article, and I think I got rid of it, but it was how much was actually raised in Bitcoin, either by Tallycoin or by Ben at BTC Sessions. I know that he started a fund. How much was raised for the truckers in Bitcoin? Well, it was enough to the point where the deputy PM and the PM decided we need to include Bitcoin and digital assets as part of the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules when it comes to banking, which is ridiculous to me. That was supposed to, well, in the United States, it's supposed to be a cash thing. But you've effectively called all these truckers, all their families, all their kids, terrorists within your own countries, and they're all Canadians. So, does this happen? And I'm going to say, does this leak southward into the United States as well? And it's you and me right now. What's happening? And, in matter of fact, there were rumblings of a freedom convoy in the United States. Is anything like that actually developing? Does anybody know that?
That I don't know, because I've been frankly too busy to follow the news. But I did see that there was a trucker convoy in Israel. So this is really a global thing.
Yeah, no, in Israel, I think there was also, I think New Zealand is actually having some sort of protest, if not a trucker protest as well, which is interesting to me. I take a look at New Zealand, I'm going, you don't really have to go that far. But I'm sorry, I'm getting off track in a little bit, I'm digressing a little bit. But anybody else who want to come up onto the stage and tell me, what do you think the end of this looks like? Not just in Canada and or the United States, but globally. What is going on here, Mike? I see you laughing. I'd like to see you. I'm gonna invite you up here because I want to hear what you've got to say about what your opinion is on this, Mike Hobart. If you want to come up, I'd love to hear what you got to say. Because otherwise, you're just going to hear me talk the whole time, and I can't do that for that long. Because I am not the talker in my family, and I'm not going to tell you who it is. But we just had dinner last night. That's a whole different story. I'm going to leave that alone. Mike, welcome up to the stage. How are you doing?
What's up, Nate? I'm doing pretty good. Last week was the mining conference in Texas, so I was trying to chill a little bit. And it didn't happen with all the stuff that's been happening the last couple of days. I'm not getting any sort of break.
Well, with everything that's been going on, in fact, and I'll let everybody know. Here's a little plug. I'll be at the Southwest Michigan meetup tomorrow night at 7:00 in Benton Harbor, Michigan. If you want to check out meetup.com and find out, or if you want to DM me if you're anywhere in the area and you want to hang out with those of us that are here in Southwest Michigan. And talk about Bitcoin. And I think that what we're going to do is we're going to help people that are new to Bitcoin get Bitcoin off of their exchanges and into their own self-custody storage. But if you want to DM me and attend that's tomorrow night at 7:00 in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And I'd love to see anybody come out that would be willing to do that. Anyways, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead. I interrupted you with that little plug.
No, you're good. Actually, I was going to ask you to remind me of what the question was because there's that little bit of delay when I hop up.
How does this end? What in Canada, in the United States, and globally, what is the effect of what this literally viral trucker movement, what is going to be the outcome of this? Do governments actually pay attention? Or is this a tipping point to see where governments actually stand when it comes to the security and the freedom of their own citizenry?
I think it's both. And the reason for that, and let me know if you're not hearing me well, because I've got my AirPods in and spaces have been buggy lately.
So far, you're good.
Okay, I think it's both. And it's kind of like a cop-out answer, but when we're dealing with like these kind of massive geopolitical ramifications. Like, for example, countries around the world got involved with the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. And I think that was a massive learning experience for all countries around the world that we're watching. And I don't think that it's any small matter, like when that happened, as far as like how quickly people rose up across the world to support an event that was going on in the United States. And I think the reason that that Western countries haven't stood up and denounced this immediately, I think that's a good tell. That some people are saying that it's a sign that other Western countries were intending on pushing in this direction as far as like squelching out freedom of speech and just general freedoms. But I get that. I don't disagree with that. but I think at the same time, there's a lot of just because there's so much tension in the air. Like you get like the tension right now, just globally, like it feels like you can cut it with a butter knife.
Mm-hmm.
I think governments are largely watching. They're trying to see. They're trying to see what they can get away with. I think we all agree on that. They're trying to see what they can get away with from their populace, but they're also seeing just how much a population is willing to fight back in the sense of defending their freedoms, especially around a group of people that are so massively important to an entire country's economy.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the literal bloodline of any industrialized country is its logistics and distribution.
Yeah. And these guys are also very closely related with our farmers, which is even, I would argue, you can't even really say that they're more important. Farmers and truckers are very much hand in hand, like the bloodline of a country. Mm-hmm. It's like if you don't have the food to like nourish and help your population grow and expand, but you also don't have the transportation rails. Like if you're missing either one of those, the country's screwed.
Right.
So I think the way this ends is, maybe this is me being an optimist, but the way this ends, in my opinion, I don't see how Trudeau's agenda plays out. Like I really don't see how this plays out in the sense of he could temporarily win out in the sense of squelching out this movement with regards to like curbing popular opinion, like causing the population to view them as terrorists, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
He could temporarily, but that's not a long game play. That doesn't make sense, because then you're, like you said, Nate, you're making all the people that are truckers and all the people that are aligned with them, not only are you labeling them as terrorists, but you're also affecting their families, their friends, their communities.
That was one thing. Yeah, that was one thing that was kind of comical when somebody brought it up. He said the tow trucks, they're not hauling away the truckers because they represent the tow trucks' income. You're talking about, hey, listen, we got to go roadside and help these trucks out. And if I go and tow this guy's rig, then I'm going to be the bad guy and nobody's going to call me anymore. They're going to call somebody that didn't come and actually haul away their rig. So it puts them between a rock and a hard place too, because they've got to figure out what loyalties they're going to actually hold.
Yeah, and the logical response to all this would just be like, lift the mandates. Then you don't have to fight everything. Like it's just, there's such a massive void in the sense of rationale and logic. And again, maybe I'm just an optimist, but logically, it just, like, this is not a winning solution. I don't like, and ultimately, this is really just Trudeau trying to double down on his policies that he's been pushing for the last couple of years.
As an American, with a deep passion for its history, and knowing that Canadians are very similar as far as how they view freedom and how they view liberty, this is why it's important to maintain your own capabilities for defense. This is why it's necessary for. I got to back up and say it differently. This is why the militia is not the bad guy. This is why private communities that have the ability to determine their own future with weapons to back that up is not necessarily a bad idea. And I know I'm going out. I know I'm going out there on a limb by saying this, because you're going to say, "Hey, you're a militia guy. You're this huge right winger." But let's be honest about this. Okay, the Battle of Concord was about guns. Okay, in 1775. Lay down your guns, or we're going to come get you. And he said, "You're going to come get them over my dead body." And that was the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And so for all of these media outlets that are saying this is an illegal blockade and these people need to step back and let the government do what they do, well, here's the problem. Trusting government is a sickness. Can I just say that out loud? Trusting government is a sickness, because government has power and you need to keep it in check. And, that was just, this is what I see is I kind of see it the way you do, and it's both, where we're going to see it's really a litmus test as to how governments feel about its citizens and its citizens' freedoms. I had somebody up that was coming up here on the stage. I think they left me, but I'm going to go on to another subject because I really think that we've kind of beaten this thing to death as far as Canada is concerned. It's really interesting, and we need to keep a finger on the pulse of it. But there was a conversation that I had last week over DM, and the question was this. The question was what type of asset is Bitcoin? Is it different for the 25, the 45, and the 65-year-old? And also, does the amount that somebody has in retirement assets change how they view Bitcoin and whether or not it's something that they should have, either one in their portfolio or two that they should be chasing as the only monetary device that they really should ever have? We're going to talk about that right after we do this quick break. Shamory is a fun and engaging game for the whole family. A twist on the familiar memory card game, playing Shamory will help you and your kids ask questions and learn about how Bitcoin mining works. A STEM-authenticated educational product, you can be sure Shamory will be a great help as you teach your kids about Bitcoin. Order yours today at shamory.com. That's SHAMORY.com and use the discount code EFFECT to save 10% off of your order. So I'm hoping that there are some people that are either financial advisors or have been in that industry that can kind of come and help with that. Because the reason I ask is because I take a look at, and if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're watching the replay on YouTube, I've got this up. I'm taking a look at the median retirement savings by age group, and this is for Americans. I take a look at, and median is not average. Median is there are as many people with less than this amount as there are people with more than this amount. And the median retirement savings for a 25 to 29-year-old right now is $3,100, liberally speaking. The median retirement savings that I'm looking at DQYDJ.com, and who is that? This is I don't even know who they are, but they had solid stats, and I'm just kind of taking a look at that. I also have it from Synchrony Bank, but I'm looking at the DQ right now, and the 25 to 29-year-old is $3,100, like I said, liberally speaking. 45 to 49, the alternative definition is what they call it. The median retirement savings is $23,500, and 55 to 64 is somewhere between $31,000 and $32,000. That's a median. That means half of the people in the United States that are that age have less than that amount in retirement savings, whereas the other half have more.
That is abysmal.
It is abysmal.
Holy cow.
It is abysmal. But that it begs the question of us Bitcoiners, what do we do? Or what do we tell people to do? Because you take a look at that number, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm 54, 55 years old. I'm going to be 55. And so, I need to take a look at those numbers and see where I'm at and go, okay, maybe not me, but when you take a look at somebody who has less than that amount, as a 55-year-old, we'll just talk about that because I think some of us in here are close to that age range. And I also want to hear from other people that are in different places in their life and how they view Bitcoin, because financial advisors are beginning to see that, I say cryptocurrencies in quotes because you and I both know that they're different, but they take a look at Bitcoin as a savings vehicle or as a vehicle to actually begin to create and amass more wealth because of what it is and the fact that we're early in the game yet. So what do we do? Mike or Log, you're up here on the stage. Yes, it's an abysmal number, but the question has to be begged: what do we do, and how does Bitcoin fit into this? We'll start. The young ones are easy because they can deal with a whole lot more risk. And is Bitcoin a risk on or risk off asset? And that's a whole nother question. But the 25-year-old, that's easy. They can throw as much Bitcoin, into their portfolio as they want to, because they have the ability to amass more wealth should Bitcoin, and this hurts to even say this because it just doesn't make any sense to me, should Bitcoin not work out the way that we think it should mathematically. Okay. But let's talk about the 45-year-old that are halfway into their working years, and they've only got on a median $25,000 in retirement savings. What does Bitcoin look like for them?
Okay, so this is going to be like me speaking out of my own ass, because I'm not a 45-year-old and I don't have a family yet.
Before you do, let me preface this entire conversation with this. None of what you hear on this program or on this replay should be construed as financial advice or legal advice. Please do your own research and consult with a professional before making any investments. There you go, Mike. Now you can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I'm not a financial advisor by any means. If it was me, if I was in that position, I would, and I only had like less than 30,000 in retirement. I would probably, if I had kids, I would be trying to acquire as much Bitcoin as I could for my children and for like any potential grandchildren that would be on the way. And I would probably be going back into trying to hustle like you're supposed to do in your 20s and 30s, and working like 2 jobs or something like that. Like if that was me, because if you're in the 40 to 50-year-old range and you don't have a retirement that's at least approaching like 6 figures, like you got to do something, because if you don't start working your ass off now to try and build up that retirement, you're not going to have a retirement to begin with, so you're going to be working your ass off to the end of your days anyway. Right.
And I take a look at a 10-year window only because I don't think that fiat is going to be dead within the next 10 years.
No, I agree with that.
Okay, and so the 45-year-old is going to be 55 in 10 years. And what you're saying, and I totally agree with this, because if I take a look at somebody who is my age or 10 years younger even at 45, and they have less than $100,000, the 45-year-old, if they have less than $100,000 in retirement savings, then I would be apt to say to them, you need to go all in on Bitcoin. Now, I'd have to convince them as to why, okay? But the why for me is very simple. There are only a few million people that actually are amassing Bitcoin or using Bitcoin, and that number is only going to continue to go up, which means that the demand for what is a finite amount of Bitcoin is going to go up, which by definition economically means that the value of Bitcoin is going to be higher. So amass it now and continue to amass it so that you hopefully have some sort of retirement income outside of Social Security, which may or may not even exist at that point in time, so that you have some hope of an actual lifestyle. Am I wrong in that thinking?
I don't think you are, but if Log or BFV want to chime in and respond, by all means cut me off, guys.
BFV, welcome to the stage. Throw your opinion in on this one.
Thanks, I appreciate it, guys. Nice to be here. I think what you guys are talking about is just so important, because the 401k system is really probably the last remaining backbone of the traditional system. And it's people who work the 9 to 5. It's people who feel confident in the program because they're being matched. But what's really happening is those people really don't know what they're investing in. And they don't know what these, quote, financial advisors, what kind of products they're actually putting them into. And in a lot of cases, a lot of these mortgage-backed securities, a lot of these high-risk, low-reward credit derivatives are being held by these portfolios to the tunes of billions of dollars. And the real issue, in my opinion, starts with education. Because I'm 31 years old, but I talk to people most of my friends are older than me. Some of them are even in their 60s, because there's just, the younger generation is just almost clueless, and the older generation is at least starting to ask questions. And it starts with them understanding that your dollars in the bank account are not savings. The dollars is not a tool to be used for savings, and you're being diluted by the creation of new units based on our government's fiscal policy. So the Fed's monetary policy allows for this crazy deficit spending that we see by the government, and you're just not able to outperform the rate at which these new USDs are being created. So to think about your 401k as a savings tool or a savings product is pretty dangerous, because number one, you're being diluted at an extreme rate. Like if you listen to the government, it's 7.5%, but if you use the older CPI metrics, it's closer to 15%. And some would even argue greater than that. So some people might feel like they're getting ahead, but in actuality, they're still losing purchasing power with these, quote, investment products. So I think the first step is for people to really start to understand, you know what? I have to self-direct my 401k. I have to take control of my financial situation. And even if I have to give up the matching that I'm getting, I have to self-direct my 401k and I have to outpace inflation. That's really step number one, because once you can get yourself into a position where you can begin to outpace inflation, at least you're not losing purchasing power. At least you can sit on the sidelines and wait and pick and choose your spots to where you want to add that risk to your portfolio. But if you're just sitting on the sidelines in a 401k and someone else is handling it for you and you're just trusting them, then most likely the inflation rates are outperforming your portfolio. So you're saying, well, what's it going to be in 10 years from now? And I think that's kind of something that helps people not care as much, because they're like, well, it's 10 years from now, so much can change. Yeah, but at the rate of 10%, 10 years from now, anything you want to buy is going to cost 100% more than what it costs right now. So you're going to get half
more
less.
with the compounding.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's even worse when you account for the compound, and a lot of those credit derivative debts, they do compound. So you're so far behind the game if you're trusting in your 401k to outperform inflation, because it's not, and the math shows us that it's not. So what we need new tools. We need new products that we haven't seen before, that these people are going to be able to learn about. And it comes down to education, right? It comes down to them understanding, wait a second, I am not outperforming here. I might feel a little bit richer, but I can buy less stuff. So I need to position myself so that I can outperform inflation. And one thing that I know nothing on here is financial advice, nothing's a recommendation, but what I tell a lot of people is to self-direct their 401k and at least get yourself into the stablecoin market, because you can bring your stablecoins, and again, I'm not promoting these products, but you can at least earn 10% interest on your stablecoin at a place like Nexo. You can go over to Anchor Protocol if you trust the decentralized system that they have, and earn 20%. Now you can start to sit on the sidelines and outperform the inflation rate and pick and choose your spots without being diluted.
Understanding how much risk is involved in actually trying to earn that 20%.
Yeah, you never want to invest in any of those sources, people.
Yeah, that's the thing, and I'm gonna pile onto what you're talking about here, BFB, is that it should be easy for a company worth its salt to be able to outpace inflation. And here's what I see that's going to happen over the next year or two. You're going to see record profits across the board. You're going to see 10% increases. You're going to see 15% increases. And the media is going to go, the economy is doing great because of all of these, or they're going to vilify these corporations for making that much money, not subtracting the 7.5% inflation that they have to beat anyway. So, you're going to look at, more vilification of corporations that are making more money only because there's more money available because of the inflation rate. Let's see, there were... I guess they have left the stage. So I'm sorry, BFB, if you go ahead and continue with your thoughts.
Yeah, no, and I think you made a great point. And like we're saying, we're not advocating for these products. What we're saying is we need to find a way to outpace inflation. And as far as UST goes, with creating that 20% yield, that is an algorithmic mechanism that's designed to keep UST at a pegged rate. So it is earned yield. And we had talked about this before with TPS, where the altcoin market, which the majority of it is garbage, they did a fantastic job branding dilution as yield. You know, I hear people talk about it all the time. Oh, I'm staking my Cardano, I'm staking my Solana, and I'm earning yield. No, you're not. It's inflation. It's the same thing as central banking. It's dilution, and you're keeping the same overall share of the market capitalization of the project, but you're not earning yield. But there are different types of strategies that you can use to actually earn yield within the crypto ecosystem. And I think that's what takes Bitcoin to the next level as a pristine form of collateral within the crypto credit markets. You can earn yield without the process of dilution.
I have to totally disagree with all of this. Bitcoin doesn't generate a yield, and any way you try to generate a yield on Bitcoin is more risk than you think it is. If Bitcoin experiences a black swan or an orange swan, goes up or down by a whole lot, most of those strategies will blow up.
Let me ask you about this strategy, because this is a pretty common market making strategy, and it's called a delta neutral position, right? So if you have 2 Bitcoin and you want to generate yield with Bitcoin without being, diluted, but of course, there's risk to that, right? There's risk to anything when there's a reward. But in this case scenario, the risk is really counterparty risk, because you're going to have to use a market in order to set up the position, maybe something like Bybit or something like Deribit. And if you had those 2 Bitcoin, you say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold 1 Bitcoin in spot in my hard wallet. And then I'm going to go over and I'm going to take 1 Bitcoin and I'm going to short it at 1x. And when the market is doing well and you're in a bull trend and those funding rates are positive, then that means that people are willing to pay you to borrow your Bitcoin to leverage their position. And if Bitcoin shoots up $100,000 overnight because something crazy happens, your position doesn't lose any value. Yeah, you do miss out on that gain. But if it goes down by $10,000 overnight, then you don't miss out on that loss either. So the delta neutral position, regardless of the change in the price of Bitcoin, the delta is 0. There's no change in the value of your position. And then what's left over is the funding fee, right? So that's what market makers do. They set up delta neutral positions that don't matter which way the market goes, and they collect those funding fees. And it's not something you would do with your entire Bitcoin stack, but it is something that we're seeing in the crypto credit markets that doesn't exist anywhere else. And products being built off of that, like the InnoSilicon trading terminal offering that kind of position setup, I think that is really going to help people start to, especially some of the bigger players, move out of holding these negative yielding treasury bonds and move into the newer market where you can hold your position and be at a positive yield.
I'll let Anthony take this one.
I mean, there's a lot of ways that you arrive at that. I mean, this goes back to what we always talk about here, is risk can never be eliminated. It can only be transformed. In that case of the delta neutral hedge, you're taking on significant counterparty risk in doing so. And to the extent that you're not, counterparty risk meaning that like somebody won't deliver on the cash settled futures end of that, the short end of that, right? And furthermore, part of like what DeFi has enabled, away from exchange properly cleared futures and stuff like that is effectively unlimited leverage. So that's furthermore like another risk that's been taken on here, where like if you're taking 10 times or 100x leverage, it really doesn't take a material hit to any of the underlying to unwind those trades. Ergo, like, I don't know, I just joined the conversation, so I'm not sure if you're talking about like Gemini specifically or anything in particular here. Like part of the 8% APYs that you're seeing are traditional savings and loans. Like they're not necessarily financing margin loans, like that are being used to do these delta neutral kind of futures exchanges and stuff. Like a lot of them are doing like traditional lending, right? Like, which is frankly even riskier than these kind of yield harvesting schemes and these ARB spreads and stuff like that. But like, again, even with the ARB spreads, the mere idea that, counterparty risk is minimal, that idea alone, which is kind of true, is why people lever it and hit the bid on it, right? That's why people lever it 10x, and hit the bid so hard on it, which creates increasing risk.
Yeah, there's definitely more risk in the leverage markets than we would like, especially from the counterparty. But when it comes to the over collateralized loans, credit is a misnomer. It's the crypto credit markets. It's the digital asset owners who actually own the collateral and then who are posting principal plus interest up front, that should be borrowing for 0 to 0.25%. The systems have it flip-flopped. There's a lot of risk in the traditional system, and you're not getting paid the proper reward for the risk that we see in those credit derivative products. And these people are borrowing based on promise, right? Credit is a derivative of debt, which is a derivative of future value. It's a promise of value that's going to be produced tomorrow. Whereas in these over-collateralized borrowing markets, you're posting collateral, which was through proof of work already secured and earned. So it's really the crypto credit digital asset borrowers who are collateralizing Bitcoin who should be borrowing at the super low rates. And in the traditional system, you're not getting rewarded for that risk. So when it comes to, determining what that risk is based on your strategy, yeah, a delta neutral position is going to have much more risk because of that counterparty risk. But an over-collateralized borrowing market is about as safe as it gets, because even if that person takes the money that they borrowed from you and they never come back, you already have the principal plus interest. You have no default risk. So I think
this is something that we've seen time and time again in the traditional finance market, and it's no different here. We've seen in the bank loan market, for example, over collateralized loans like that. The bank loan market has blown up in circumstances where you have 110 cents on the dollar secured collateral. Never even mind like covenants in specific collateral for liquidation. Like we've seen those markets blow up time and time again. Because this goes back to I think the last call Nate had, you need to be able to predict the future. And to the extent that loan were to default and you have the collateral, the broker there who's giving the margin loan needs to liquidate the collateral. So when you have a circumstance where you have this systemic, it's a risk-free ARB, you do a delta neutral hedge, or you just even a traditional loan, borrow off of your Bitcoin, whatever, fully collateralized, rehypothecate it, take either a stable coin or something else out the other end. There are these systemic events where it causes a short-term liquidation of Bitcoin. It impairs that collateral, and it really becomes the brokers tripping over each other to liquidate their collateral to recover their loans because they got to pay somebody else out the other end, right? So that's the kind of selling pressure that happens in the traditional finance market. And this is why, we've talked about this a lot in Nate's spaces and log spaces. The credit question is one of the most important questions facing Bitcoin right now. How do you do credit in Bitcoin in a way that you're not just speed running the history of traditional finance, in the sense of we've just recreated a system that's ever so slightly more productive because you're eliminating middlemen and overhead. But how do you do a system of credit where you're not actually threatening the underlying, Bitcoin, the soundness of Bitcoin,
and,
right?
Yeah, and there's no fractional reserve banking available in order to make that happen. I need to circle back to my original question because we're kind of talking about derivatives trading and something that's kind of way off topic as far as what does the average 25, 45, and 65 need to think of Bitcoin as they pursue retirement? And I think we're kind of focused on the 45-year-old. And Anthony Bardaro, as you're up here, I kind of want to pose the question to you. What is the difference in the type of asset that Bitcoin is when you kind of run through the gamut of those generations? How do they view Bitcoin as an investment, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, can you repeat the question again, Nate? Sorry to make you do this because, you know, you're incredibly polished here, but it was a little fuzzy. Your mic's a little fuzzy.
I am not polished. I'm just oily shiny. It's okay. Anyway, the question was, I think it was before you came up here, it was for the 25, 45, and 65-year-old that are the average American that is pursuing retirement. And I actually ran through the numbers here, and I'll kind of run this by again. The median retirement savings for the American 55 to 64-year-old is less than $35,000. And so how much gambling are they willing to do because they're about to get into their retirement years? So what kind of an asset is Bitcoin to that generation? And then we'll go back a generation. The further back you go, it's easier to say Bitcoin is the right thing because it's a risk-on asset. And if you lose that money, you're able to make that money in the next 10 years and be 35 and not be the worse for wear.
Yeah, like listen, Log's done the most work on this and the potential of this market, but like just to answer the question straight up, like for the average American is who you ask, or for the average American, it's an asset. It's not a currency, it's not a store of value or anything else. It's an asset that kind of replaces what they used to use gold and commodities for in the portfolio. It's a catastrophe hedge. It's somewhat of an inflation hedge, but it's like most certainly a catastrophe hedge. And in terms of position sizing, it's like really like what's the probability of the system blowing up in the very special way that currency gets debased locally for me, and not so bad that I'd prefer to own guns and butter, right? Which is like a pretty big swath. Like the guns and butter is a 4, 5, 6 standard deviation event. Like this is the kind of calamity that's like, oh, I don't want to own treasuries because, treasuries are a 2 or 3 standard deviation event. Like beyond that, like I guess Bitcoin's what I want to own. Like for the average American, that's not a very high probability event. And I know a lot of people here disagree with me on that, but like I've proffered my research on that. That said, like there are Americans for which things like financial access and other principles are held more dear. So from the idiosyncratic standpoint, if you step away from the average American and you go towards like, frankly, the American who's like super wealthy, or the American who's like the opposite of super wealthy, to the point where they're unbanked and stuff like that, there are real use cases here where I think it's a meaningful part of the portfolio. For the super wealthy, obviously it's a crooked number allocation. For the non-super wealthy, it's more of a flow, right? Like this is probably the best way for me to get my paycheck and pay my bills eventually. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think that answers the question, right? Like for the average American, it's actually not that much more than like a low single digit allocation to the portfolio in all likelihood, probably even less. But it's really those people in either tail, the super wealthy or the unwealthy, that it's for, if that makes sense. But I think Log's the one who's done the most research on this.
Log, would you say that Bitcoin is a risk-on asset?
Fundamentally, no, but that's how it's perceived by the marketplace right now, right? Like if the marketplace understood Bitcoin, there wouldn't be so much volatility and wouldn't react the way it does to things. So only a small portion of Bitcoin holders really get it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's our opportunity right now. The fact that the market thinks it's a risk-on asset shows you that they just are misunderstanding what it really is, and that creates the opportunity for us to stack as much as we can before they realize.
When the executive orders come out, everything's going to crash, and that's because nobody's going to understand that basically Bitcoin is spared from the executive order, but it's going to take the market days or weeks to figure that out. And people are going to lump it all together. So that's when you buy. I'm like actually waiting to buy more until the executive order comes out.
Yeah, I think that when you take a look at risk on versus risk off, I think you're taking a look at the term, because I think long term we agree that it's a risk off asset. However, when you take a look at the roller coaster ride that Bitcoin is going to take in its youth, it's still did I say risk off or risk? I forget what it is. And you guys know what I mean. It's a risk off asset long term. It is a risk on asset short term because of the roller coaster that it is. And you don't want to, if you're living hand to mouth, put everything into Bitcoin, risk that 50% and not be able to pay your mortgage or your rent. That's where we got to have the balance. Take the ride. You have joined the stage. What say you about the what type of asset is Bitcoin when it comes to pursuing the retirement?
Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me all right?
I can, Nate.
You cut out. Okay. Hopefully I'm still here. I think part of that question is, are you convicted? Because it changes. If we're talking about the traditional American, the single digit is probably, the Paul Tudor Jones 5% is probably what we're looking at, because that's what they're going to be advised. And that's what they're going to hear in general. And they feel safe in the other things because they watched it go up. They watched the equity in their home go up. They watched their 401k increase, as long as they weren't too much into Facebook. But They should be okay. I think for the Bitcoiner, you're already there. If you've done any kind of research, I would say over a 2-month period, and you've already bought a little bit, and you've watched where it can go, and you've done the math, I think you're all in. I don't have kids, so I can't necessarily meet your some of the aspect of 40 to 45-year-old. But I will say that I've never saved more money in my life than I did last year, and I see Bitcoin as a savings vehicle. I mean, it is that investment that I hope goes up, that I hope the rest of the world adopts. But I'm probably a little over water. My head's above water, I would say, with my DCA and where Bitcoin is at now. Yeah, it's just I'm all in. But I mean, that's my name, so.
Yeah, right. I see that. Turk and then JP, I want to get your opinions on this. Ryan, I see that you're down there requested as well. We may have to rotate some folks. We got a number of you up here on the stage. But Turk, what have you to say about this?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. I'm joining you from Charlotte, North Carolina. I think Bitcoin is at a risk-off, because it's digital and this is what the kids want. I grew up in a gold place. I grew up in Turkey, and they're on the news all the time. They're printing money, printing money, printing money. But here in the US, unfortunately for general public, we're really removed from our government. We're really removed from real news. A lot of people think even New York Times is a liberal outlet, which is not. So I think more and more people after COVID, what we're recognizing is people, normal day-to-day people, recognize that they and only they are responsible for their well-being. You know, corporations close the doors, they say, sorry kids, and then we're like, holy crap, what do we do? So I think we're going to see more and more people going to Bitcoin, especially as they understand. I think more people that are really reading it and understanding it rather than just buying into these hyped up shillers. I mean, that happens on every new technology. That's how internet was. I'm older than internet. I remember all these chat rooms with the scammers and all that's going to happen. But us in the Bitcoin community, people who are actually understanding it, seeing this as actually a tool for our fellow humans to gain their own freedom from the government control and powers and banks and insurance companies and all that. I wonder if we as people who are in the community, if we start thinking in terms of Satoshis rather than making this Bitcoin where people cannot really understand the volatility in the market. And then make it normal, because every currency is volatile. But of course, the media that's being controlled by the people, you would think that it's just like things are going crazy. But I don't think, maybe it's not the Bitcoin that's fluctuating, but maybe it's the US dollar. It's fluctuating. We could maybe change the narrative because there is enough of us.
I see it regularly.
This is Turk, and I'm done speaking.
Yeah, in the first Star Trek movie, when Spock was showing Scotty his own invention of how to actually transport into something traveling at warp speed, and Scotty went, "Huh." It never occurred to me to think of space as the thing that was moving. And you're making my point here. It's like, it's not Bitcoin that's volatile. It's everything else, because there's only going to be so much Bitcoin, and we all know that. JP, you're next up on the stage. Welcome in. What have you to say?
Hi, Nate. Hi, everyone. I want to circle back to the previous comment. I think two people actually hit on it. If we're talking about somebody who's around 25 years old, they've got $35,000 of savings, the number one thing that they can do to impact their net worth is to save more and spend less. And this, like, I can't stress this enough. It's such a huge factor. It's something that I went through, and I understand from my own personal experience. And I was saving at a 50% savings rate. And I can't tell you how much that changed where I am today. When you run the numbers, if you only have $35,000 and you're 25 years old, and you've got 40 working years ahead of you, you essentially have the equivalent of zero, and you're pretty much at square one, and you're saying, I've got 40 years of saving runway. I need to get my butt into gear, and whatever you do now makes a huge difference. Because when you're looking at Bitcoin and talking about the is it a risk on or risk off on a long-term basis, there are really two risks that you face with Bitcoin. One is whether or not it continues to exist, and two is whether or not it increases in adoption. If you have a high level of conviction and understanding that Bitcoin will continue to exist and increase in adoption, then that means that your long-term risk is minimal, if negligible. The only short-term risk that you have is day-to-day fluctuations, but because you have a long-term time preference, that becomes that's something that doesn't really matter. And so, like, I ran a few quick numbers using this scenario: 25-year-old, 40 years runway on their savings. Let's say that we've got an average inflation of 5%, which is higher than the historical averages, but we maybe expect a little more. You've got even just at a kind of crummy 10% rate, which we expect Bitcoin to be. But maybe in the long term, maybe in 40 years from now, Bitcoin's not going to be increasing at 10% per year. At that point, its value is its purchasing power maybe increases approximately at the rate of GDP or something related to population growth. So kind of conservative numbers. Let's say that you save for 40 years and you have a real rate of only 5%. If you only have that $35,000 and you don't do anything, you're gonna end up having $246,000 real dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really enough to do much with, right? In retirement, you need to have,
especially in 40 years. Especially in 40 years.
40 years, and I mean, it is a real rate, so that's inflation adjusted. But if your retirement plans, you probably need somewhere between a minimum of $1 million and probably closer to $2 or $3 million, depending on your situation, where you want to live, what kind of lifestyle you want to have. But let's call it $1 to $3 million. You're a far cry from that. But let's say that you make an effort to save just $10,000 per year in addition to what you're doing right now. That moves you in 40 years from $246,000 to $1.5 million. Now, that's a 41x on where you started versus having only a 7x on where you started. And so I just want to pound that principle home a little bit. Like, if you're young, if you're in your 20s or 30s, you've got so many years of compounding. Every single year counts massively. So get your butt into gear. Save $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year more, because that is going to completely change the trajectory of your life. And what people need to stop getting so caught up in is chasing after yield, chasing after short-term gains, and playing the gambling and altcoins, because the time that people spend wasting their time on those efforts, they could simply go get another part-time job or full-time job. I mean, there's nothing wrong with working 80 hours a week when you're young. And you could spend your time otherwise actually be out mining, saving it in Bitcoin. And if your returns are better than 5% per year, which I'm very confident they will be, you're going to be in a completely different situation within 1 decade, not to mention even 40 years.
Yeah, you actually stole the thunder from the question I was going to ask you. I was going to say, listen, you're talking to 25 and 30-year-olds that are saying, hey, listen, I can't afford the payment on my rent, let alone trying to get a down payment for a house. How am I supposed to save this $10,000 a year that you're talking about? And it is a matter of, put your nose to the grindstone, work the 60, 80 hours a week, because you got the energy to do it. At least you should have the energy to do it. And if you haven't been sitting and eating the chips while you've been playing your video games, oh, wait a minute, I said that out loud. Anyway, then you have the opportunity to go ahead and try to pursue some sort of retirement, because you've got to think about 65. Even though you're only 25, 30 years old, you've got to start thinking about that now. Bitcoin Holding Company, you are next up on stage. Welcome in. What have you to say?
Yeah, yes, hi there. I have a quick concern, and I was wondering maybe Locke can also pitch in and say something, because he has a balanced view. Lately, I hear a lot about, Bitcoin being for freedom, for, Now, there's a lot of talk about the truckers, but to me, like, Bitcoin is for everyone, right? I mean, it's for Republicans, Democrats, for governments, for Wall Street, for poor, for rich, brown, black, dictators. I mean, you name it. Why are we polarizing this world? And if we want buy-in from the governments, why are we, bringing all this stuff up? I think at the time that regulation is really on top of the news for every country in the world, shouldn't we look at Bitcoin differently and include people rather than exclude people in general? It's just like a concern that I had.
Well, let me ask you this question: how is it that you think that Bitcoin as a money is excluding people?
Well, I mean, when I hear these podcasts, like, they're saying that if you're a Bitcoiner, you got to be a vegetarian or a meat eater, or you can't look at things this way, or you can't look at things that way. I don't think we should bring those views into like owning Bitcoin. Like, they say Bitcoin is for freedom. Of course it is for freedom. But do we want to exclude people that are for governments, for regulation, for other things? I just don't understand. It's like peer-to-peer transactions.
Yeah,
right?
I'm on the Bitcoin is for everyone bandwagon, and I think even if you don't think Bitcoin is for everyone, you ought to say so for game theory reasons. So I'm not going to disagree with anything you said. I'm also not going to pick fights with Bitcoiners anymore. That was no fun. And yeah, and so I'll just leave it be. What I would look at the focus of the shows that we run here on the Bitcoin Spot. And I think you'll find it's a pretty broad message that we have here.
Yeah, the one thing that I want to do specifically on this show is to talk about the social, the economic, and the political effect that Bitcoin has. And you're going to have people that want to polarize, that want to persuade people to think the way that they do. And if Bitcoin or owning Bitcoin or trying to use Bitcoin as a banner for their ideal is a way to do it, well, then they're going to use it to do it that way. There's no getting around the fact that there are those type of people. Do I want to be one of them? No. Do I want to highlight the fact that it's happening? Sure I do, because that way you're warned that, hey, you're going to deal with people that you don't like, that are trying to persuade you, or they're trying to raise Bitcoin up as a banner for their ideal. It's going to happen. There's no getting around that. To try to squelch that is part of the problem. And that's why we say Bitcoin is freedom, is because every idea should be represented. Not only should it be represented, but it should have the right to be expressed. And that's what we need to accomplish. And it's messy and it's dirty, but it's right. So that's my opinion as far as the freedom of speech and expression is concerned, and how Bitcoin does or does not actually, forward any of those ideals. But I think that those ideals, need to be heard, and they need to be either accepted or rejected individually and as as communities, and that's how we determine what ideas are good and what ideas are bad. It looks as though, is it Dusty? Dusty, you're next up on the stage. What have you to say? Welcome in.
Hey. What's up, man? I love what you guys are saying, and I keep thinking, like, I think the best way to fight toxic people is to just kill them with kindness, fight their ideas and say it in an amicable, nice way. And then I think other people will recognize you more because you're doing that.
Well, I appreciate that. So as you've been listening to the conversation as far as Bitcoin and retirement, how do you talk to people that are in different age groups as far as, why Bitcoin is important for them to consider as part of what they own?
That's a hard question. I think, like, for me, I really try to figure out where they're at with thinking about retirement. And, like, I'm honest, like, a lot of people that I know in the normal world just, like, don't think about it at all. So I end up not even talking about Bitcoin, but just about, like, setting yourself up to build wealth in the future and trying to, like, communicate that sort of thing.
I think that the difference really just boils down to allocation. If you're, up there in years and you're starting to draw down your savings, you may not have enough to be 100% Bitcoin and deal with the volatility currently in its buying power. So it depends on, I think allocation depends on so many things. Number one, conviction level, but your age, the reliability and consistency of your income. Do you have dependents? And so it's really a personal decision, but you got to start with conviction factor and then build from there.
I think that the conviction factor is paramount. It's absolutely primary. Because, as most of us in this room that I would gather, they say Bitcoin is the best monetary device that's ever been created, and more and more people are going to adopt it. More people are going to use it, and as the demand for it continues to increase, therefore will its value. And but not everybody thinks the way we do. In fact, most people don't think the way that we do, either because they haven't been exposed to it or because they've been exposed to it in some negative light by some media outlet or personality that they follow. It's just a matter of having the conversations, having them in a civil discourse, much like we're having here, so that ideas can be expressed, so that people can determine what is right, what is wrong, and whether or not they want to put their value into what Bitcoin is. So, that's just, that's where I sit on that. And I know that a lot of you feel that way as well. It's funny because every time I try to bring somebody up, they just go away. So Log, I may just have you do it because I don't know if I'm just kicking people out or what's going on, but that's, that's what's up. But I'm glad that we're able to talk about this because people, like the statistics I talked about earlier, I said, you want to have conversations with people that, are behind and ahead when it comes. And when you take a look at the median numbers of the fact that, let's face it, most Americans are behind the 8 ball when it comes to being able to retire. And they're counting on Social Security. Gee, another government program that they're trusting that in order to do what we're doing, in order to be able to retire, was what I should say. I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. I should never do that. So, if anybody else want to kind of comment on how they talk to people when it comes to, whether they're behind the 8 ball or how Bitcoin is good for them. JP, you got something. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is something I've given quite a bit of thought to, heard a lot of opinions from different people. And my current thinking is that it really has to do with identifying the need. I mean, we're kind of saying, how do we orange pill people from different backgrounds at different ages? And it really has to do with what is it that they need at their current stage of life, and then helping them identify. I think it's helping them identify and understand that need is there. And after that, once they identify that need, and if they agree with that need, then they start trying to look for a solution for that need. And Bitcoin inevitably becomes a solution for a lot of needs. So I think it really has to do with identifying that need. So like for an older person, it might have to do with like, maybe their retirement isn't quite where they want it to be, or maybe it's the concern and fear of having their money depreciated away through inflation policies. Not having enough money for their retirement. Maybe for a younger person, it has to do with having hope for a future where they can afford the assets that they want to have. Because a lot of younger people feel completely defeated.
Oh, absolutely.
I would argue I think that's a big reason why we see such a low savings rate, why we see such a low total median net worth of younger people, because it's not untrue. They're in a system that the odds are all against them, and not trying to like poke and point fingers at their forefathers, but they've kind of been put into a situation where the ball has been punted down the field a lot of times, and there's not really much punting that can happen anymore. And now this generation has to pay for it, and they're paying for it by finding out they may never. I think it's like 75% of younger people say that they don't expect that they'll ever be able to own a house.
Oh, I know a number of them.
That's a very sad statistic, right?
It is yeah, because my kids are now in their early 30s, and many of their friends are in their late 20s, and they're like, "There's no freaking way I'm going to be able to own a house. I can't make enough with my current skill set or with the market the way it is to be able to either one, save for a down payment on a house, which has to be 20% for somebody young because they've got no credit history." and then try to make the payment after that while they're trying to pay rent at the same time. And that's the hole that they feel like they're in. And it's just, and it's really disappointing for a lot of those people because they just don't think that they can ever get ahead.
Absolutely. And whether it be the assets that they want to buy and own or the services that they'd like to have, it might be a house. It might be education, the cost of inflating education. Maybe it's simply healthcare. Like all of these things are increasing at rates that are faster than they can possibly increase their income.
Right.
And so all of a sudden they're in a world where there's no way to win. And so what are you going to do if you're in that situation? Unfortunately, a lot of people go and say, well, my only chance is winning the lottery. And guess what? There's this exciting world of blockchain lotteries that I can go play in.
Oh my word,
and
yes.
And right? And that's, I think, why we see so many people go there, because they've given up and they feel hopeless and they're looking for hope. And so so again, it depends on the person, their time of stage in life and their need. But this is a huge need for a lot of people. It's to say, guess what? There is hope. There are all these terrible things that have happened around you. And actually, you know what? Yeah, in some ways you've been the victim here, but you don't have to have a victim attitude, because there is hope and there's something that you can do about it. And guess what? There's a plan, a savings plan that will make it so that you can have all the assets that you desire to have, all the services that you need and want in your life, and you can have them and guarantee them for your future and your posterity as well.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
And then it's like, oh, okay, well, what is that? If it's not going and buying lottery tickets in the crypto casino, what is it? And like, oh, it's that thing called Bitcoin that people don't realize. They don't understand what it really is.
And you're either gonna turn them on or turn them off right away. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Shane, you've got your hand up. Hey, welcome in, buddy. It's been a while since we've talked.
Hey, yeah. Sorry I'm joining late. So you guys may have talked about this, but I feel the same way about kids and our kids owning homes. I've got 4, one that's already 21 and 18 and 16 and 12. So I think the same thing, and I'm just thinking and hoping that as more people start saving their wealth, if you will, using Bitcoin as a store of value, I'm hopeful that homes will actually, relative to Bitcoin, go down in price enough that it's more reasonable.
I see in the short term that's going to be difficult because we need 8 million homes right now, and there's only 1.5 million per year being built. So there's still a supply.
Sure,
that's short term. Yeah, that's short term. Yeah, but I understand totally what you're saying. Miggy, I will get to you, but I do know that Wicked Smart has come up to the stage, and he's been waiting for a while. Wicked, what have you to say?
Hey guys, thanks for having me up.
You bet.
This is an interesting topic, and I don't want to go too off topic, but I'm curious how you think this will all evolve as Bitcoin becomes more and more adopted, more widely adopted, and once the rate of appreciation drops to, say, whatever the we always say Bitcoin will maybe one day represent the value of everything, right? And so if that does happen, then the rate of appreciation would then reflect the kind of appreciation of the value of everything. So the innovation of the world, kind of, right? So once the appreciation rate drops to that point, how do you see this all playing out? How will Bitcoin still serve in the ways that we're talking about now, kind of as like a good savings vehicle for retirement or just in general? What do you guys think of that?
I think it does, personally. First of all, I think that the temptation for governments to utilize a fiat system is just too great for it to not continue, or to continue to exist, or to exist again. I think that the desire to make sure that their constituents are happy enough to reelect them or to not kill them is just, they need that fallback position to be able to utilize fiat so that they can kind of squelch a catastrophe. So the Bitcoin is always going to be that asset that is the microscope that looks at governments and how they are enacting monetary policy now and into the future. which, a lot of people are going to disagree with, thinking that Bitcoin is going to be the only monetary unit that ever is going to be. The problem with that is that we don't know how credit's going to work. There's going to be liquidity issues because of the ebbs and flows of a global economy. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think that it's going to continue to have value, to an increase in value, or to at least measure the value of a country's monetary supply, making it the safe base in this game of tag that people can run to when they feel like their government isn't doing properly in a monetary system. Neil Jacobs, welcome up to the stage. It's been a while since we have talked. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am making the Twitter spaces, hopping back and forth between a bunch of them. It's been a fun day in Bitcoin land.
Well, I'm glad you decided to join us.
Yeah, there's so much going on in the world. It's crazy.
It is crazy what's going on in the world, and I tried to pick 3 or 4 topics that people will want to talk about. I think I got lucky with this personal finance thing. So, as far as retirement is concerned, do you have something that you wanted to add to an input to that?
Well, I came in a little late, so I don't know what has been said and what hasn't been said, so I don't want to.
No, the basic question is for the 25, 45, and 65-year-old American, and all of whom have a median retirement savings, which is well below what it needs to be in order for them to be able to retire. What do you tell them that Bitcoin is for them as they pursue retirement in what they think is going to be a fiat system for the rest of eternity? Which obviously we don't think that that's the case because of Bitcoin being the measuring stick that measures it all. But we got people that have to take a look at Bitcoin as an asset or as a way to preserve the value through time as they pursue that retirement age, be that 65 or whatever they determine that that's going to be. So how do you talk to people when it comes to that regard? And I need to say this again because it's been at least a half an hour since I've said it. Nothing that we say here on this channel should be construed as financial advice or legal advice. None of us here profess to be professionals. Make sure that you pursue a professional before making any investment decisions. Sorry, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, as you just said, clearly I'm not here to give individual financial advice. Everyone's situation is very specific to them. I feel like the 60-40 portfolio idea is dead, right? 60% equities, 40%, bonds for people.
Well, especially in this market, with the bond market is actually negative.
Right. Especially, this was a lot for people closer to retirement age. You need something that's going to either, pay you, bring in some kind of cash flow or appreciate. And only Bitcoin is the only riskless asset over a long period of time, in my opinion. Businesses have operational risks. They have government risks.
When you say that Bitcoin, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but when you say that Bitcoin is riskless, that is your position, because obviously we'll go back to Saifedean Mahmood's book, The Bitcoin Standard. The Bitcoin is binary. Either it's going to work or it's not. And you have to be heads or tails on that. You've either got to believe it or you've got to not. There's really no in between on that. So go ahead with your thought, but I think that I want to make sure that that's where you're coming from, is you are definitely heads on that coin. You believe that it's riskless because it's going to work.
Well, yeah, I would say it already is working. Bitcoin is one of the few bearer assets in the world that can't be confiscated from you. The network has had incredible uptime throughout its history. I think in the last 8+ years, it's been up 100%. So I look at it, the network itself doesn't pose there's no risks. There's not going to be a protocol failure at this point. Every 10 minutes, you're getting a new block. The short-term risk is the currency fluctuation, relative to your fiat currency, but over a long extended periods of time, number go up. It's almost as if it's mathematically programmed to keep going up over time. And we're only seeing things in the macro environment fundamentally reinforce why Bitcoin is necessary.
So let me see if I can infer your position here, because somebody said to me last week that Bitcoin is a different asset for different age groups. because of the risk on, risk off definition and because of where they are in their pursuit of retirement. What you're saying is that, no, it's not. Bitcoin is pretty much the same for everybody because it offers the same benefits to everybody across the board, whether you be 25 and 40 years away from retirement or whether you be 60 and you're 5 years away from retirement. Am I close to right on that, or do you need to correct me?
I would say in terms of it being a tool, it's the same for everybody. In terms of like financial needs at a given moment, no. As I was saying, like if you're near retirement age and you need funds to pay certain bills, clearly you might not be able to handle the fluctuation in the fiat value of that Bitcoin at that moment. But you know, I'm not saying go 100% in. I'm just saying you need to have Bitcoin in your portfolio. And I hate even saying that because I don't look at Bitcoin really as an investment. I look at it as a better form of money. It would be like if I had Argentinian pesos versus dollars. I'd hold the dollars and I'd never think about going back into the pesos ever. Right. Unless I had to, because the person would only accept the pesos. I look at Bitcoin the same way. Anything I put into Bitcoin, I look at it as I'm never getting out of it unless I need to go back into dollars to use it for something. Right. But that's, you know, depends on your age, you know, your time preference. There's a lot of factors there.
All right. I want to get at least a couple more people on before we call this an episode. We are at the bottom of the hour. Miggy, you've had your hand up for a while. What say you about this?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks, Nate, for letting me on stage. I just wanted to support JP's point because I think it's actually really accurate because one of the reasons that I got into Bitcoin last year, I bought a house with my girlfriend, and like her mortgage is gonna be soon when I'm like 54. But one of my goals into Bitcoin is that so I can pay my house earlier, right? And I think it's important to see that, you know, it can help you in like acquiring so many things, right? Because I mean, I really don't want to live in a world, you know, where I will actually be 54, then I will pay my house, and then I'll just keep my retirement plan money, right? I think that it might not be enough, because if for people that are trying to retire right now, it's not enough. I mean, in the future, it's even going to be less, right? Especially if you save in dollars. So I think that's really important into Bitcoin, that it actually allows you to maybe retire earlier, kinda. I mean, it depends on your time horizon, right?
Well, Anthony, I think I'm going to steal your thunder because I'm going to say this to Miggy. Why would you pay off your house when you can leverage your house to own Bitcoin? I just stole your thunder, didn't I?
Yep, I wouldn't advise it, but it's the obvious question, right?
Yeah, it's like, why would you do that when you, especially at today's rate? Now, Miggy, I don't know I'm not sure where you live or what your interest rate is, but here's the thing. I know that my interest rate is less than 4% on my house, and there's no freaking way that I'd plan on paying off my house if I have the opportunity to buy Bitcoin, knowing that Bitcoin, you know, year over year has been, you know, what, 70 to 100% year. And even if it goes down to 30, oh my word. I'm still making a heck of a lot more money on that leverage than I would be by trying to pay off the house and not have the Bitcoin. So
Miguel is coming at us from El Salvador.
Okay.
And I take this moment to tell everybody tomorrow, Miguel's going to be hosting his own show.
Oh, fantastic.
Bitcoin Spot, and it's going to be our first show that's in Spanish. So looking forward to that. That's going to be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific tomorrow if you are a Spanish speaker.
So let me tell you why. Actually, I think this is also like a personal reason, but I believe that to be free, that you must be financially free, right? So that you must have like not any like liabilities or like mortgages or debt.
So you're basically of the Dave Ramsey approach that if you're debt free, then you are free, as opposed to using debt to leverage anything as far as a profit capable, whether that be business or whether that be Bitcoin. Is that your position?
Yes, that is exactly my position.
Okay,
So,
well, that's.
you know,
I want to get to Dos Satoshis before we end the show. I'm a little bit over time, but Dos Satoshis, welcome to the stage. You've been waiting a while. What have you to say?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can. You're loud and clear.
Okay, awesome. No, I just wanted to say I haven't been in this that long, just a couple of years. And yeah, most of my friends, anywhere from 25 to I guess like 40, their allocation is very near 0 to 1%. And
Total income allocation, or talking about Bitcoin allocation?
Sorry, total Bitcoin allocation is between 0 and 1%. And I think it's just a matter of a lack of understanding. And what I found myself doing early on was telling people, yeah, if you could just spend 100 hours studying Bitcoin, you could get really wealthy by, being comfortable enough to invest in it. And then I soon realized that nobody's going to do that. And nobody's even willing to spend 10 hours so far that I've talked to. And I think what it'll take is, eventually Fidelity, a bank like Fidelity, when other ones jump on and take a position like theirs, where they're actually studying it and eventually recommending that, 1 to 5% should go into Bitcoin. I think that may turn a corner for us. But when it comes to that point, I think people are already in this are going to feel more comfortable taking out a second mortgage to buy more Bitcoin. And I think the risk curve just people keep stepping up a level further than they were before based on the risk. And, the last thing I was going to say is that I think it's just going to take a few catalysts. And one of them is hopefully the government. The thing I keep hearing is the government's going to shut it down, blah, blah, blah. I think as soon as something official comes out showing that they're definitely not going to shut it down, and people are actually backing it, and maybe this happens during the next midterm election or something, people's eyes will open, and it will, I don't know, I think it'll make a big difference. But right now, for most people, I think they should be at 1%, get some skin in the game.
Sure.
But, the more you learn about it, the lower you'll find the risk is, like Log was saying. And, people like us, maybe it's 50%. Maybe it's higher.
Yeah, for anyone in the audience who still thinks the government may shut down Bitcoin or try to shut down Bitcoin, like the top regulator in the U.S. is basically a Bitcoiner, and he was hired because he's a Bitcoiner, and he's like looked directly in the camera and basically said, Bitcoin is fine. We have a problem with crypto, not Bitcoin. And so, you're just not hearing, and everything that's happening, everything that's being approved, every major financial institution, none of that would be happening if they knew the government was, going to try to shut it down. And now you've got politicians from both parties running on Bitcoin. So they're not even going to try to shut it down.
Yep. I want to thank everybody for being on the stage. That's going to do it for this episode of The Bitcoin Effect. I want to thank everybody that came up onto the stage. Too many names to list off, but hey, if you're listening to a replay of this episode of The Bitcoin Effect on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, I want to thank you for joining us. Consider leaving a comment or review saying that you'd like to hear more of what we're doing here. It helps us out a lot, and it also helps others who don't know much about Bitcoin to discover the program. If you want to join the conversation, make sure to join me every Monday beginning next week at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific on Twitter Spaces. Visit thebitcoinspot.net and click the link to follow at the Bitcoin Spot and watch for the link in your feed. Make sure to join or make sure to be on Twitter later today for Off the Deep End with Tomer Strolight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, followed by Big Brain Bitcoin at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, and you'll never know who might show up. Log, again, thanks for having me be able to host this show. Thanks for joining me, and make sure to join me on Monday next week for The Bitcoin Effect.
What on earth got you interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
Okay, so what's Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is...
So what's Bitcoin?
Inflation-resistant money.
Bitcoin is the strongest asset the human race has ever invented.